It was on a typical Saturday afternoon that my peaceful life in Lake County turned into a total nightmare. I was having a barbecue with my family at the condo's recreation area when this older lady with graying hair and a stiff posture walked up like she owned the place. My wife Madison was filming our kids playing in the pool for her channel, while Rocky, our golden retriever, was chilling in the shade of a tree. "Y'all need to get out right now. This is my private area," declared Susan Palmer, our neighbor from number 47, in a tone that mixed arrogance with a fake authority. I was confused and tried to explain that the space was common to all the residents, but she just raised her hand, cutting me off. "I'm the president of the Homeowners Association, and y'all are breaking the condo rules." Little did I know that this interruption was just the start of a war that would change our neighborhood forever. Subscribe to the channel and hit the like button to get more stories like this. 2 hours after that initial confrontation, a police car pulled up in front of the recreation area. Officer Harrison, a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor, came over as Susan gesticulated wildly at his side. My kids, Tyler and Emma, stopped playing in the pool and came over looking scared. "Mr. Brooks, we got a complaint about trespassing," explained the officer, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Madison immediately whipped out her phone and started recording, which only made Susan protest even louder. "This meddler and her family have been disturbing my privacy for months," Susan shouted, pointing at my wife. "And now they've got the nerve to record me without permission." Officer Harrison, showing admirable patience, asked to see any documentation that proved exclusive ownership of the area. Susan turned white for a moment, then quickly recovered her composure. "I'm gonna go get the papers at my place," she said, marching off toward her home. I took the opportunity to show the officer my purchase contract, which clearly stated our right to use the common areas. After about 15 minutes of waiting, Susan came back with a pile of disorganized papers, none of which could back up her claims. "Ms. Palmer," Officer Harrison said firmly, "this is clearly a common area in the condo. You can't stop other residents from using it." While Susan stormed off, throwing furious looks in our direction, the officer quietly warned me, "You might want to document any future interactions with her. I have a feeling this isn't over." And he couldn't have been more right. After the police incident, Susan ramped up her campaign against our family. She started leaving fake official notices in our mailbox, all printed on letterhead with a poorly made logo for the supposed Lake County Homeowners Association. The first fine arrived on a Monday. Use $500 for excessive dog noise. Rocky, our golden retriever, barely even barked. On Tuesday, we got another one. Use $750 for unauthorized use of recording equipment in a common area, clearly aimed at Madison's filming for her channel. The notices got more and more absurd. One demanded use $1,000 for excessive pool occupancy because Tyler had invited 2 friends over from school. Another charged US $2,500 for improper use of the lawn when Emma had a picnic with her dolls. Susan wasn't content with tormenting just our family. Soon enough, other residents began receiving similar fines. The Johnson family got a notice for premature Christmas decorations in October. The Ramirezes were fined for irregular parking in their own garage. The peak of her creativity came when she installed fake cameras pointed at our house. Small black plastic boxes with flashing lights, obviously bought at some toy store. Along with the cameras, a notice arrived informing us of an HOA-approved surveillance system and a US $2,000 fine for documented antisocial behavior. I decided to consult my friend Christopher, a lawyer specialized in real estate law. He confirmed what I had already suspected. There wasn't any registered homeowners association in Lake County. All the notices, fines, and threats were completely illegal. "This is documented harassment," Christopher explained as he examined the pile of fake notices I'd kept. "And with those cameras, she's stepping into dangerous territory. You've got grounds for a stalking lawsuit." But before we could take any legal action, Susan decided to up the ante. She had no idea her actions would eventually come back to bite her in a way nobody could have predicted. The residents of the condo, fed up with Susan's constant meddling, decided to get clever with their revenge. It started with the teens from number 52, who created a fake Superintendent of Homeowners Association inspections and left an official-sounding notice on her door. The letter stated that her self-proclaimed HOA was under federal investigation for document forgery. The letterhead was so convincing that Susan panicked. I even passed by her house that morning and saw her running around, hauling piles of papers to the trash. Soon, other neighbors joined in on the fun. The Martinez family sent a notice from the Common Area Protection Agency demanding an inspection of her home. The Thompsons contributed with a summons from the Committee on Condo Administration Ethics, requesting her presence at an imaginary hearing. The cleverest move came from Mr. Peterson, a retired graphic designer. He created an official-looking document from the Condo Regulation Secretariat, stating that Susan would be fined $10,000 for running an unregistered association. He even included a QR code that, when scanned, led to a fake website with more legal threats. Madison, with her social media savvy, suggested that we document everything. We set up a discreet camera, a real one, that captured Susan going door to door, trying to figure out who was behind the notices. It was like watching a live reality show. One morning, Susan got a particularly alarming letter from the Federal Housing Regulation Department, courtesy of the Watsons, who worked in graphic design. The document claimed she was under investigation for illegal exercise of condo authority, and that federal agents would pay her a surprise visit. That day, Susan didn't leave her house. Through our camera, we saw her nervously peeking out the window at every passing car. She even called her lawyer, William Schultz, who spent 2 hours at her place trying to calm her down. The highlight of this operation happened when the residents organized a fake, official inspection. 3 neighbors, dressed in business attire and carrying clipboards, stopped in front of Susan's house. Before they could even ring the doorbell, she bolted out the back and hid at a friend's house. My lawyer friend Christopher warned us that we had to be careful not to cross any legal lines. But he admitted he was impressed with the neighborhood's creativity. Sometimes, the best way to deal with a tyrant is to show just how ridiculous their behavior is, he commented. The pranks worked for a while. Susan started thinking twice before handing out her own fake notices. She stopped installing toy cameras and cut back her patrols of the common area. But like a cornered animal, she was just biding her time, getting ready for her next move. No one imagined that she was about to take our dispute to court, a decision that would eventually reveal a surprising truth about her own property. A court summons arrived one Thursday morning. Susan was suing not only my family, but also 5 other residents for coordinated harassment and violation of private property. The lawsuit? $2 million. Her lawyer, William Schultz, looked just as unprepared as she did, presenting a case full of basic errors and unfounded allegations. Christopher took over our defense and, during case preparation, made an interesting discovery in the city records. We decided to keep that information under wraps for the right moment. On the day of the preliminary hearing, Susan showed up at court dressed like the head of a corporation, carrying a folder stuffed with her fake notices. Judge Thompson, a man in his 70s with decades of experience, kept a neutral expression as Schultz presented the case. According to him, Susan was the legitimate president of a historic homeowners association, established decades before the condo was even built. She demanded total control over the common areas and compensation for the emotional damages caused by her neighbors. When Christopher stood up to present our defense, the real show began. Methodically, he presented official documents proving that no registered HOA had ever existed in Lake County. He showed photos of Susan's fake cameras and played videos of her intimidation attempts. "Your Honor," Christopher said, "Ms. Palmer not only fabricated a non-existent authority, she also systematically harassed her neighbors with threats and fake fines." The turning point came when he revealed our big find. He presented old blueprints of the condo and updated city records. Actually, there is a property violation in this case, but not in the way that the plaintiff alleges. Susan went pale as Christopher projected a detailed map of the property boundaries on the court screen. Her beloved garden, where she spent hours cultivating her award-winning roses, extended 3 meters beyond her legal boundary. Ironically, that area belonged to our lot. "Ms. Palmer," Christopher continued, "you have been illegally using 27 square meters of property belonging to the Brooks family for 8 years. Judge Thompson adjusted his glasses and looked at Susan over the rims. Schultz started sweating, frantically shuffling through his papers for some counter-argument. Madison, sitting beside me, squeezed my hand, trying to hide her smile. "Ms. Palmer," the judge said, "your case not only lacks legal foundation, but also reveals a series of possible crimes, including document forgery and harassment. I suggest you reconsider your position." For the first time since I'd known her, Susan was rendered speechless. Her face alternated between angry red and pale white. Schultz whispered something in her ear, and she nodded mechanically. "Your Honor," Schultz said, "we would like to withdraw the lawsuit." The judge accepted the withdrawal, but not without warning Susan about the consequences of any future intimidation attempts. As we left the courthouse, Christopher warned me that this probably wasn't the end of the story, and he wasn't wrong. Susan had one more trick up her sleeve, and it would be her boldest move yet. A week after the hearing, I was woken by the noise of a chainsaw. I ran to the window and couldn't believe my eyes. Susan, wearing a gardening jumpsuit and safety goggles, was methodically cutting down each of her prized rose bushes. Beside her, an improvised sign read, "Last day of the garden. Final clearance." Throughout the morning, she sold her award-winning plants for laughably low prices. Roses that had once won state competitions were practically given away to anyone who stopped by. I watched, intrigued, as she turned her prize-winning garden into a barren patch. The real reason behind this peculiar clearance became clear 3 days later. A construction crew showed up at dawn. The project Susan had presented to the city was simple: an extension of her garage, exactly covering the old garden area, including the part that legally belonged to my lot. Christopher immediately filed for an injunction, but Susan was smart this time. She hired a reputable surveying company that, coincidentally, provided measurements different from the original blueprints. According to the new survey, the disputed area fell within her property limits. The ensuing legal battle was grueling. Experts were called in, old maps were compared with new ones, and even satellite photos entered the debate. Madison started documenting everything for a special on her channel, which quickly went viral. The case gained so much traction that the local news sent a team to do a report. During the interview, Susan nailed the role of the victim. "I just want to exercise my property rights," she declared, tears streaming down her face. "After being hounded by nasty neighbors, I found I can't even grow my roses in peace anymore." The tide began to turn when my 12-year-old son Tyler made a startling discovery. Fascinated by drones, he was playing with his new gift when his camera captured something odd on the roof of Susan's house. Hidden under a tarp was a professional surveillance system, very different from those fake cameras she'd previously installed. Recordings from that system, obtained through a court order, revealed the truth. Susan had been moving the boundary markers at night, before the surveyors arrived. The video clearly showed her shifting the territory markers by a few centimeters every night over the course of 2 weeks. The judge was not at all impressed by this revelation. In addition to ordering the immediate demolition of the illegal construction, he imposed a hefty fine for procedural fraud. Susan tried to argue that the recordings were illegal, but the judge only reminded her that she had installed the cameras herself. That night, as I watched the demolition crew tear down the partially built garage, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Rocky lay by my side, his head on my knee, while Madison finished editing her video documenting the whole saga. Susan stayed in her house during the demolition, the curtains drawn tight, but that didn't mean she had given up. Somehow, I knew she was already planning her next move, and it would be something no one could have predicted. Autumn arrived in Lake County with an unexpected twist. One morning, we noticed a for sale sign in Susan's garden. 2 days later, a young couple came to check out the house. The next day, another. In 1 week, over 10 potential buyers had visited the property. Madison, always on the ball, noticed something odd during the visits. "Dad," she said, "Susan is showing buyers old photos of the garden, like the roses are still there." And she was right. Susan had put together an elaborate album of her former garden, conveniently omitting its recent destruction. The newlyweds, the Chens, completely enchanted by the pictures, made an offer. Susan accepted suspiciously fast. When Christopher heard about the sale, he warned me, "James, something's not right. She took a value way below market price." Susan's real play was revealed during the home inspection. The inspector hired by the Chens found that she had strategically shut down several of the house's systems during the tours. The air conditioning was set to run for only 15 minutes per tour. The basement lights were purposely dimmed to hide extensive water damage. And worst of all, she had hidden documents about a serious structural flaw in the foundation. But Susan had miscalculated. The Chens weren't naive buyers. Lisa Chen was a civil engineer, and her husband Michael was a lawyer specializing in real estate. They not only canceled the purchase but also reported Susan to the real estate board for fraud. The news spread quickly through the neighborhood. Other potential buyers backed out, and Susan's already battered reputation took another hit. That's when she made the most radical decision yet. One Thursday night, moving trucks pulled up in front of her house. Instead of hauling her belongings, though, they started unloading new furniture. Susan was turning her home into a vacation rental, listed on short-term rental platforms. The first group of guests arrived that weekend, 12 college students looking for a chill lake experience. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. In less than 24 hours, the house Susan had guarded so fiercely became the epicenter of wild parties. "She's doing this on purpose," my 10-year-old daughter Emma remarked as we watched yet another group of partygoers arrive. "She wants us to feel the way she used to." Christopher checked the local regulations and found that short-term rentals were technically allowed, but there were strict rules about noise and maximum occupancy, rules that Susan's guests constantly broke. The situation hit its peak during a particularly chaotic weekend. A group of guests decided to throw a barbecue at midnight with blaring music and fireworks. When the police turned up, they found not just a wild party, but also evidence of illegal activities. Susan, who was monitoring everything remotely through her cameras, had no idea that her revenge plot was about to backfire in an even more devastating way. What happened next would permanently change not only our neighborhood, but also the fate of her beloved home. The police found illegal substances during the party, and, after a more detailed investigation, discovered that some of the previous guests had turned the basement into a makeshift lab. Even though Susan lived elsewhere, she was legally responsible as the owner. The Lake County Police Department launched a thorough investigation. They discovered that Susan wasn't just neglecting the property's supervision. She had actively ignored several complaints about suspicious activities. Her very own security cameras provided damning evidence. The authorities decided to seize the property under civil forfeiture laws. Susan tried to argue that she was an innocent victim, but her own recordings betrayed her. The videos showed that she had deliberately ignored obvious signs of illegal activities, caring only about punishing the neighborhood with noise and disturbances. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone. The same obsessive surveillance she used to harass her neighbors ended up turning into evidence against her. The cameras she installed to monitor us recorded her own criminal negligence. Christopher, who followed the case closely, explained that the house would probably be auctioned off by the government. "It's a fitting end," he commented. "Her obsession with control has cost her everything." Madison produced one final video on the case, which became her most viral yet. She titled it, "The Watched Watcher: How Karma Works." The video hit millions of views and sparked a national debate on the limits of surveillance in residential communities. A few weeks later, I saw Susan for the last time. She was standing in front of the house, watching as officers put up isolation tape. Our eyes met briefly. For the first time, there was no anger in her gaze, only deep sadness, and maybe even a hint of regret. The house was sold at auction months later. The new owner? Ironic as it is, a family that turned the property into a community garden, open to all the neighborhood residents. Subscribe to the channel and hit the like button to get more stories like this. 5 years have passed since Susan left Lake County. The community garden that replaced her house has become the heart of the neighborhood, exactly the opposite of what she always stood for. The roses have started blooming again, but now everyone takes care of them, especially Mr. Thompson, who discovered a hidden talent for gardening later in life. Madison graduated from journalism school, and her documentary on Susan became a case study at several universities. She still occasionally gets emails from people sharing similar stories from their own neighborhoods, as if Susan had inspired an entire generation of self-declared vigilantes. Last week, something curious happened. I received a letter with no return address, but I immediately recognized the meticulous handwriting. It was from Susan. She wrote about how years of reflection had made her realize just how much her obsession with control had consumed her life. She admitted that the garden was her only true joy, and that she used the rules and cameras as a twisted way to connect with people. "Sometimes," she wrote, "we spend so much time building walls that we forget what it's like to live without them. Seeing my old garden turned into a shared space made me understand what I lost all these years." Rocky, now an old but still loyal dog, continues to lie in the same spot where he used to watch Susan on her rounds. Sometimes, it seems like he misses those days of confrontation. After all, she was his favorite adversary. Emma, now a teenager, runs a gardening club in the community space. Ironically, some of the techniques she uses to grow the flowers came from Susan's old notes, found in the basement during renovations. Lake County has changed. The fake cameras have given way to genuine smiles, and the notices have been replaced by invitations to Sunday barbecues. Even Christopher admits that Susan's case, as stressful as it was, ended up uniting the community in a unique way. As for me, I still occasionally look out the window at dawn, half expecting to see Susan in her gardening coveralls, measuring the grass with a ruler. Some stories, no matter how they end, never really leave us. Subscribe to the channel and hit the like button to get more stories like this.